The wind was bitter that November evening, cutting through everything like tiny knives. Rachel sat at the edge of the old bridge, her legs dangling over the side. Below her, the dark water moved slowly and she could hear it splashing against the concrete pillars. She had been sitting there for almost an hour, just staring down, thinking about how easy it would be to just let go. 2 years ago, Rachel's life was completely different. She was a nurse at the local hospital, the kind of person who always had a smile ready for her patients. She loved her job, loved helping people feel better, loved being useful. But then came that rainy Tuesday afternoon when a truck ran a red light and crashed into her car. Everything changed in that single moment. The physical injuries healed mostly, but the pain never left. It started in her back and spread everywhere, a constant burning and aching that never gave her a moment of peace. The doctors gave her medicines, lots of them, but they barely helped. Some days the pain was so bad she couldn't get out of bed. Eventually she had to quit her job. The hospital was understanding, but understanding doesn't pay the bills. Rachel watched her savings disappear month after month. First went the emergency fund, then the money she had saved for a house, then everything else. The medical bills kept coming. Endless papers with numbers that made her stomach hurt. Her insurance covered some things, but not others, and the gap between what she needed and what she could afford grew wider every day. Her friends tried to help at first. They visited, brought food, sent encouraging messages. But as the months passed, the visits became less frequent. People have their own lives, their own problems. Rachel understood that, but it still hurt. The loneliness was sometimes worse than the physical pain. Her family meant well, she knew that. But they didn't understand. Her mother kept suggesting alternative treatments she'd read about online. Her brother thought she just needed to think more positively. Her sister sent her articles about people who overcame chronic pain through willpower and determination. Each suggestion, each article, each piece of advice felt like they were saying the same thing. You're not trying hard enough. This is your fault. So Rachel stopped talking about it. She stopped answering calls. She stopped pretending she was okay. And tonight, sitting on this bridge, she had made up her mind. The pain was too much, the loneliness was too much, the feeling of being a burden was too much. She was ready for it all to end. That's when she heard footsteps behind her, heavy boots on the concrete. She didn't turn around. Maybe whoever it was would just walk past. Maybe they wouldn't notice her in the darkness. But the footsteps stopped. Cold night. A man's voice said. It wasn't threatening, just matter of fact. Like he was commenting on the weather, which technically he was. Go away, Rachel said quietly. She didn't have the energy to say it louder. I'm David, the voice said, and I'm not going anywhere. Rachel finally turned to look at him. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, wearing a warehouse uniform and carrying a backpack. His face was tired, the kind of tired that comes from more than just a long shift at work. There was something in his eyes that made her pause. Recognition, maybe, understanding. You don't know me, Rachel said. You don't know anything about me. So please, just keep walking. David didn't argue. Instead, he moved to the railing, keeping a respectful distance from her, and leaned against it. He wasn't looking at her, just staring out at the same water she'd been watching. You're right, he said. I don't know you, but I know that look. I've had that look. Rachel felt anger rising in her chest. Oh, here we go. Another person who thinks they understand. Another person who's going to tell me it gets better. That I just need to hold on, that tomorrow's a new day. Save it, I've heard it all. I wasn't going to say any of that, David replied calmly. Because honestly, sometimes tomorrow isn't better. Sometimes it's just as hard as today. Sometimes it's harder. This wasn't what Rachel expected. People always tried to fill the air with hope and positivity, empty words that meant nothing. But this guy was different. Then why are you here? She asked. David was quiet for a moment. 3 years ago, I was in the military. Got sent overseas, saw things that nobody should see, lost people I cared about. When I came back home, everyone expected me to just go back to normal life. Get a job, hang out with friends, be the person I was before, but that person didn't exist anymore. He shifted his weight, and Rachel noticed he favored his left leg slightly. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. Couldn't go to crowded places without panicking. Couldn't talk to anyone about what I'd been through because nobody here understood. They'd thank me for my service and then change the subject. I felt completely alone even when I was surrounded by people. Rachel found herself listening, really listening. There was something raw and honest in the way he talked. No sugarcoating, no trying to make it sound inspirational. One night, David continued, I was in my apartment with my service weapon. I had it loaded. I had it ready. I was absolutely sure that I was done. That the world would be better without me in it. That my family would be sad for a while, but then they'd move on and be relieved they didn't have to deal with my problems anymore. What stopped you? Rachel heard herself ask. David smiled, but it was a sad smile. My cat sounds stupid, right? But my cat jumped on my lap right at that moment. Started purring, kneading my leg with her paws, and I thought about what would happen to her. Who would feed her? Would she understand why I was gone? Would she wait by the door for me? He shook his head. It was the smallest thing, the stupidest reason to stay alive. But it was enough for that night. And then I had to figure out what to do about the next night, and the night after that. Rachel felt tears on her cheeks. She hadn't cried in weeks. She'd felt too empty to cry. I'm not here to tell you some miracle happened and everything got fixed, David said. It didn't. I still have bad days. Really bad days. But I found some things that help. Some people who get it. And I learned that sometimes staying alive isn't about finding some big reason or purpose. Sometimes it's just about getting through one more day. I'm in pain, Rachel whispered. Every single day. All day. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of fighting. I believe you, David said simply. I'm not going to tell you it's not that bad or that you're strong enough to handle it. Maybe you're tired of fighting. That's valid. They sat in silence for a few minutes. A car passed behind them, its headlights briefly illuminating them before disappearing into the night. I have a weird request, David finally said. Give me 30 days. Let me prove to you that at least one person in this world actually cares whether you're here or not. Not because you're useful, not because you make them feel good about themselves, but just because you're you. 30 days. If after that you still feel the same way, I won't try to stop you. But give me 1 month. Rachel looked at him like he was crazy. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Because someone should have done it for my friend Jake, David said quietly. He came back from deployment with me. He was struggling too, and I was so wrapped up in my own problems that I didn't pay attention to the signs. One day he just didn't show up for our weekly call. And then I got the news. His voice cracked slightly. I can't change what happened to Jake. But maybe I can be here for someone else. Maybe that counts for something. Rachel didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to tell him to leave, that his guilt wasn't her responsibility. But another part of her, a tiny part she thought had died, was curious. What would 30 days even look like? What was he planning to do? I don't want pity, she said. Good, because I'm not offering pity. I'm offering coffee and conversation. That's it, this is insane. Probably, David agreed. But what have you got to lose? Rachel almost laughed at that. What did she have to lose? She'd already lost everything. Her job, her savings, her health, her independence. 30 more days of existence wouldn't change anything. But maybe, just maybe, she was curious enough to see where this strange encounter would lead. Fine, she said finally. 30 days. But I'm not making any promises, David nodded. Fair enough. Can I walk you home? Or call someone to pick you up? Rachel hesitated, then slowly pulled herself up from the edge. Her body ached from sitting in the cold for so long, and she winced as pain shot through her back. I can manage, she said. I'm sure you can, David replied, but I'd feel better if I knew you got home safely. Humor me. And so they walked together through the quiet streets, two strangers bound by pain and loneliness, starting a 30-day journey that neither of them could have predicted. The next morning, Rachel woke up confused. For a moment, she couldn't remember why she was in her bed instead of at the bottom of the harbor. Then it all came flooding back. The bridge. The stranger named David. The bizarre 30-day agreement. She looked at her phone. It was 7 a.m, way too early for someone who'd been up most of the night. There was a text from an unknown number. Morning. Coffee at 8? There's a small cafe 2 blocks from your place. The one with the blue awning. No pressure if you're not up for it. Rachel stared at the message. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to go back to sleep, to pretend last night never happened. But she'd made a promise. 30 days. She could manage 30 days. She texted back a simple okay and dragged herself out of bed. Getting dressed was always a challenge. Some days her body cooperated, some days it didn't. Today was somewhere in between. She managed jeans and a sweater, ran a brush through her hair and called it good enough. The cafe was small and warm, with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh bread. David was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. "I didn't know how you take it," he said, gesturing to the sugar and cream on the table. "So I got it black and you can add whatever you want." Rachel sat down carefully, her back protesting the movement. "Black is fine." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. David wasn't pushing conversation, which Rachel appreciated. Most people felt the need to fill every silence with words, so what's the plan? Rachel finally asked. "For these 30 days. Do you have some kind of schedule or program or something?" David shook his head. "Nothing like that. I was thinking we could just hang out. Talk if you want, sit in silence if you don't. I'm not a therapist or a life coach. I'm just a guy who works at a warehouse and plays too many video games. That's it? That's your big plan?" "Pretty much," David admitted. "I figure you've probably had enough people trying to fix you or change you." "I'm not here to do that. I'm just here to be here." Rachel took a sip of her coffee. It was good, strong, and hot. "This feels pointless." "Maybe it is," David said. "But we won't know unless we try." Over the next few days, a routine developed. David would text in the morning, asking if Rachel wanted to meet up. Sometimes she said yes, sometimes she said no. When she said no, he'd just send a simple, "Okay, maybe tomorrow," without guilt or pressure. When she said yes, they'd meet at the cafe or sometimes just sit in the park if the weather was decent. They talked about random things. David told her about his job at the warehouse, the weird characters he worked with, the silly mistakes that happened on night shift. He told her about his cat, Pepper, who was apparently very demanding and very judgmental. Rachel found herself talking too, little bits at first. She told him about nursing, about the patients she remembered, about the time a kid gave her a drawing as a thank you gift. She didn't talk about the pain or the accident or the bridge. Those topics felt too heavy, too real. On the 5th day, David showed up with a chess set. "Do you play?" he asked. "I used to a long time ago. My dad taught me when I was a kid." "Perfect, teach me." "I know how the pieces move, but I'm terrible at strategy." They spent the afternoon playing chess, and David wasn't kidding about being terrible. He made impulsive moves, didn't think ahead, and lost his queen within the first 10 minutes of every game. "You need to think 3 moves ahead," Rachel explained, showing him different scenarios. "Chess isn't about the move you're making now. It's about setting up for what comes next." "Like life," David said thoughtfully. "Maybe," Rachel admitted. "Though life doesn't have clear rules like chess does." Something shifted during those chess games. Rachel realized she was teaching again, using her brain in ways she hadn't in months. It felt good to be useful, even for something as simple as explaining chess strategy. On day 9, David asked if she wanted to come to a meeting with him. "What kind of meeting?" Rachel was suspicious. "It's a group I go to. Veterans and other people dealing with chronic stuff. Physical pain, mental health issues, whatever. It's informal. Just people talking and supporting each other." "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "That's okay. The offer stands whenever you want to take it." But on day 12, Rachel surprised herself by saying yes. She was curious and maybe a little lonely. David's company was nice, but it was still just one person. The meeting was in a community center basement, which Rachel thought was a bit cliché. About 15 people were there, ranging from their 20s to their 60s. No one looked particularly special or inspiring. They just looked like regular people who were tired. A woman named Lisa facilitated the meeting, but it wasn't formal. People just talked when they felt like it. An older man spoke about his arthritis and how frustrating it was that people expected him to just push through it. A young woman talked about her anxiety and how exhausting it was to pretend to be okay all the time. Then someone asked if anyone new wanted to share. David looked at Rachel but didn't pressure her. She shook her head. She wasn't ready, but she listened. And what struck her most was that nobody tried to fix anyone else. Nobody offered unsolicited advice or toxic positivity. When someone shared their pain, others just nodded and said, "That sounds really hard," or "I understand." That was it. No solutions, no judgment, just acknowledgement. After the meeting, several people came up to introduce themselves. They were friendly but not pushy. One man, Thomas, mentioned that he also dealt with chronic back pain from a work injury. "If you ever want to talk about pain management stuff, let me know," he offered. "I've tried about everything under the sun. Some things helped, some didn't, but I can at least tell you what's out there." Rachel found herself nodding. "Thanks. I might take you up on that." On the drive home, David didn't ask her what she thought of the meeting. He just turned on the radio and hummed along to the music. Rachel appreciated that. She needed time to process. That night, alone in her apartment, Rachel thought about the people at the meeting. They were all struggling with their own battles, but they kept going. They hadn't given up. She didn't know if that made them strong or stubborn or just scared of the alternative. Maybe it was all three. Day 15 brought a surprise. David showed up with a folder full of printed papers. "What's this?" Rachel asked. "I did some research. About your condition, the type of pain you have. I found a doctor about 3 hours away who specializes in innovative pain management. He works with cases like yours that haven't responded well to traditional treatment." Rachel felt defensive immediately. "I've seen dozens of doctors. They all say the same thing. I know. And maybe this doctor will too. But maybe not. Would you be willing to try? I'll drive you there. We can make a day trip out of it." Rachel wanted to say no. She was tired of doctors. Tired of being poked and prodded, tired of getting her hopes up only to be disappointed. But David was looking at her with such genuine hope that she couldn't bring herself to refuse. "Fine, but I'm not expecting anything." "That's fair," David said. The appointment was scheduled for day 18. The drive took them through rural countryside, past farms and small towns. David brought snacks and made a playlist of ridiculous 80s music that made Rachel laugh despite herself. The doctor's office was nothing special, just a regular medical building. But Dr. Williams himself was different from other doctors Rachel had seen. He listened, really listened, for almost an hour. He asked detailed questions about her pain, her daily life, what she'd already tried. He didn't rush or dismiss her concerns. Then he examined her thoroughly and looked at all her medical records. Finally, he sat down and talked to her like she was a person, not just a patient. "I'm not going to lie to you," he said. "I can't cure you. But I think we can manage your pain better than what you're experiencing now. There are several approaches we can try. Some are newer treatments that many doctors don't know about yet. Some are combinations of therapies that work better together. It's going to take time and patience, but I believe we can improve your quality of life." For the first time in 2 years, Rachel felt a tiny spark of hope. Not hope for a miracle cure, but hope that maybe life didn't have to be quite so unbearable. Maybe she could find a level of pain that was manageable, that would let her have some kind of life again. On the drive back, Rachel was quiet. David didn't push her to talk. When they got back to her apartment, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said simply, "for today. For all of this." David smiled. "We're only 18 days in, 12 more to go." But Rachel was starting to think that maybe, just maybe 30 days wouldn't be enough. Maybe she wanted to see what came after. Day 20 began like the others, with a text from David and coffee at their usual cafe. But Rachel noticed something different. She'd woken up that morning, and instead of immediately feeling the crushing weight of despair, she'd felt something else. Not happiness exactly, but maybe the absence of complete hopelessness. It was strange and unfamiliar. She'd started the new treatment plan from Dr. Williams. It was too early to see major results, but there were small improvements. The pain was still there, constant as ever, but some of the sharp edges felt slightly dulled. Or maybe she was just learning to work with it better. Either way, she'd had 2 mornings this week where she could get out of bed without wanting to cry. "You look different," David observed as they sat down with their coffee. "Different how? I don't know. Less gray, maybe, like someone turned up the brightness just a little bit." Rachel considered this. "I think I'm sleeping better. The nightmares aren't as frequent." She'd been having nightmares since the accident, sometimes about the crash itself, sometimes about being trapped in pain forever, sometimes just vague anxiety dreams that left her exhausted. But lately she'd had a few nights of actual rest. "That's good," David said. "Sleep makes everything a bit more manageable." They'd finished their coffee when David pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. He had a thoughtful look on his face, the one Rachel had learned meant he was working up to saying something. "What?" she asked. "I have an idea." "You can totally say no, but I want to run it by you." Rachel braced herself. "Okay." "At the support group, I've been thinking about how helpful it is, how just having people who understand makes a difference. And I was thinking about that night on the bridge, how you were so sure nobody cared, nobody understood." "Where are you going with this?" David put his phone down and looked at her directly. "What if we created something? A program or a system where people who are in that dark place could be matched with someone who'd commit to just being there. No therapy, No professional help necessarily, just genuine human connection. 30 days of someone actually caring. Rachel stared at him. You want to formalize what you did for me? Not exactly formalize. Keep it human and personal. But yes, basically. Make it so that people in crisis have someone who will show up, who will sit with them, who will prove that somebody gives a damn. That's ambitious, and probably complicated. Definitely complicated, David agreed. But think about it. How many people are sitting on bridges right now feeling completely alone? How many people might choose differently if they just had one person who was committed to showing them they matter? Rachel felt something stirring in her chest. It wasn't quite excitement, but it was close. For the first time in years, she was thinking about something bigger than her own pain. I'd need to know more, she said carefully. About how it would work, about safety, about all the logistics. David grinned. So you're interested? I didn't say that. I said I'd need to know more. But they both knew what that meant. Over the next few days, they talked about the idea constantly. David researched existing crisis intervention programs, peer support models, volunteer training requirements. Rachel, drawing on her nursing background, thought about the ethical considerations, the boundaries that would need to exist, the warning signs that would require professional help. They talked to people in their support group about it. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Almost everyone had experienced that profound loneliness, that feeling of being invisible to the world. Several people volunteered to help develop the program. Lisa, who facilitated their group, had connections in the mental health community. She introduced them to a counselor who could help design training for volunteers. The counselor, Dr. Patricia Reeves, was enthusiastic but realistic. What you're describing is peer support, she explained when they met with her. It's incredibly powerful, but it needs structure. Volunteers need training on boundaries, on recognizing when someone needs professional intervention, on how to take care of themselves so they don't burn out. We don't want it to feel clinical, David said. The whole point is that it's human connection, not therapy. It doesn't have to be clinical, Patricia assured them. But it does need to be safe. For everyone involved. They worked with Patricia to develop a training program. It would cover active listening, recognizing crisis escalation, self-care for volunteers, and understanding when to involve mental health professionals. The commitment would be 30 days, just like David had offered Rachel. Volunteers would check in with their matched person regularly, offering presence and connection without trying to fix or save them. On day 24, Rachel had her first real setback since starting the new treatment. She woke up in excruciating pain, worse than it had been in weeks. Her body felt like it was on fire, and even the smallest movement made her want to scream. She texted David, "Can't meet today. Pain is bad." His response came quickly. "Okay, need anything?" She wanted to say no, wanted to handle it alone like she always did, but she thought about what they'd been planning, about the idea of genuine connection. She texted back, "Company would be nice, but I'm not leaving my apartment. Be there in 20 minutes. David showed up with soup from the Vietnamese restaurant down the street and didn't make a fuss about the state of her apartment. Rachel hadn't cleaned in days, and dishes were piled in the sink. He just set the soup on the coffee table and sat in the chair across from her couch. "This is what it's really like," Rachel said bitterly. "This is the reality. A few good days and then back to this. Maybe trying to get better is pointless." David didn't argue or try to convince her otherwise. "Today is really hard," he acknowledged. "That's true. It's always going to be like this. I'm always going to have these days." "Maybe," David said. "Probably, yeah. But you're also having days that aren't like this now." "That's different from a month ago." Rachel wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. A month ago, every day was this bad or worse. Now she had some days that were manageable. It wasn't everything, but it was something. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I'm scared that I'm going to wake up one day and realize I made a mistake. That staying alive was the wrong choice." "That's fair," David said. "I can't promise you won't feel that way. But if you do, you call me, or Thomas or Lisa, or any of the people who've become part of your life these past few weeks. You don't have to face those moments alone anymore." They sat in silence for a while. David pulled out his phone and started reading, not leaving but not demanding attention either. Just being present. Eventually, Rachel fell asleep on the couch, and when she woke up a few hours later, the pain had eased slightly. David was still there reading his book. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "I know. I wanted to. Day 28 brought unexpected news. The community center where their support group met offered them a small grant to launch their peer support program. It wasn't much money, but it was enough to get started. They want us to present the program to their board, David told Rachel excitedly, to explain what we're doing and how it will work. Rachel felt panic rising. I can't do public speaking. I can barely handle the support group. You don't have to, David assured her. I can do the presentation. But I think it would be powerful if you were there, if you could share your perspective. About wanting to die? About you finding me on a bridge? That's pretty dark for a board presentation. It's honest, David countered, and honestly is what's going to make this work. Rachel thought about it for a day. Then she agreed with conditions. She would go, she would share her story, but she wouldn't sugarcoat it. She would tell them the truth about pain, about loneliness, about how close she'd come to giving up. And she would tell them why this program mattered. The presentation was scheduled for day 30. The day that was supposed to be the end of their agreement. The day when Rachel would decide whether she wanted to continue living. But standing in that conference room, looking at the board members who would decide whether to support their program, Rachel realized something. The decision had already been made. Not on day 30, but gradually over the course of coffee meetings and chess games and support group sessions and honest conversations. She told her story, and she didn't cry. She was clear and direct about how dark things had been, and how the simple act of someone showing up and caring had made a difference. Not a miracle, not a complete transformation, but enough of a difference to matter. I still have chronic pain, she concluded. I still have hard days. This isn't a fairy tale where everything gets fixed. But I'm here, and I'm working on a project that might help other people like me. That feels like enough reason to stick around. The board approved their program unanimously. As they walked out of the community center, David turned to Rachel. So today's day 30, he said. We made it. We did, Rachel agreed. And I'm thinking I'd like to see what day 31 looks like. And 32. And maybe a whole bunch of days after that. David smiled, the kind of genuine smile that reaches the eyes. I think that sounds like a pretty good plan. They went to their cafe to celebrate, ordering fancy coffee drinks they normally wouldn't buy. As they sat there, Rachel thought about how strange life was. A month ago, she'd been ready to end everything. Now she was planning her. The program officially launched 6 weeks after that first night on the bridge. They called it the Connection Project, purposefully avoiding words like intervention or prevention. The focus was simple: genuine human connection for people who felt utterly alone. Rachel threw herself into the work. She used her nursing background to help develop protocols, worked with Patricia to refine the volunteer training, and helped interview potential volunteers. Every person who wanted to join had to go through a screening process, not because they doubted people's good intentions, but because this work required a specific kind of commitment and emotional stability. The first volunteer they trained was Thomas, the man from their support group who dealt with chronic pain. He understood the physical and emotional toll that constant suffering could take. The second was a woman named Helen, who'd lost her husband to depression years ago and had spent the time since trying to understand and help others. By the end of the third month, they had 12 trained volunteers. The community center connected them with people in crisis through their existing hotline and counseling services. When someone called in distress, they were offered traditional resources like therapy and crisis counseling, but also offered the option of being matched with a Connection Project volunteer. The first match happened on a Tuesday evening. A young college student named Kevin had been referred by his campus counselor. He was struggling with depression, felt disconnected from everyone around him, and had been having thoughts about ending his life. He was already seeing a therapist but needed more support. David took the match. He met Kevin at a coffee shop near campus, and they talked for 2 hours. Kevin was surprised that David didn't try to cheer him up or tell him everything would be fine. Instead, David just listened and shared his own struggles with adjusting after military service. My therapist helps, Kevin explained, but I only see her once a week. The rest of the time, I'm just alone with my thoughts. And my thoughts are pretty dark, so let's not make you alone with them, David suggested. What if we met up a few times a week? Nothing structured, just hang out. We could play video games or get food or just walk around. Whatever sounds good. Over the next 30 days, David and Kevin met regularly. Some days they talked about serious things. Other days they just played games on Kevin's console or went to see movies. David didn't solve Kevin's problems or cure his depression, but Kevin wasn't alone anymore, and that made the hard days more bearable. Rachel took her first match in month 4. A woman named Angela had been dealing with a chronic illness that forced her into early retirement. She was only 45 but felt like her life was over. The isolation and loss of purpose had pushed her into a dark place. Rachel understood Angela's situation intimately. They met at Angela's apartment because some days Angela couldn't leave the house due to her symptoms. They drank tea and talked about the frustration of being sick, about how people who haven't experienced chronic illness don't understand that it's not about being lazy or negative. People think if you're not dying, you should be grateful, Angela said one afternoon, but they don't understand that there's a space between healthy and dying where you're just existing in pain, and it's exhausting. I know exactly what you mean, Rachel replied. And anyone who hasn't lived it has no right to judge how you cope with it. Something powerful happened during those conversations. Rachel realized that in helping Angela, she was also helping herself. Talking about pain management strategies, sharing the small victories and big setbacks, acknowledging the reality of chronic illness without sugarcoating it, all of this reinforced Rachel's own coping strategies. By month 6, the Connection Project had helped 23 people. Not all the matches were success stories. 2 people decided they needed more intensive professional help and were connected with appropriate services. 1 person stopped responding to their volunteers' outreach and disappeared. That one haunted David for weeks until they got word through the referral source that the person had moved to another state to live with family. We can't save everyone, Patricia reminded them during a volunteer supervision meeting. And that's not the goal anyway. The goal is to be present, to offer connection, to give people a chance to feel less alone. What they do with that chance is ultimately up to them. Rachel found this hard to accept at first. Her nursing background had trained her to fix problems, to make people better, but she was learning that sometimes the best help you could offer was just showing up and acknowledging someone's pain without trying to take it away. The program started getting attention. A local newspaper did a story about the Connection Project, interviewing Rachel and David about how it started. They kept the details vague, not mentioning the bridge or that specific night, but talking generally about the power of peer support. After the article came out, they received dozens of emails. Some from people wanting to volunteer, others from people asking to be matched with someone, and several from other communities wanting to know how to start similar programs. This is getting bigger than we expected, David said one evening as they went through the emails. We might need to actually get organized. Rachel looked at the screen full of messages. Maybe that's not a bad thing. If what happened to me, what you did for me, could be replicated in other places. It could help a lot of people, David finished. They reached out to organizations that specialized in peer support and mental health advocacy. With guidance, they developed a framework that other communities could adapt. They created training materials, best practice guidelines, and a handbook for starting similar programs. But with growth came challenges. Not every volunteer worked out. One person became too emotionally involved with their match and had to be removed from the program for everyone's well-being. Another volunteer burned out after 3 months and needed to step back. Rachel herself hit a wall in month 8. She'd taken on 3 matches simultaneously, was helping coordinate the program, and was still dealing with her own chronic pain. One particularly bad pain week coincided with a crisis with one of her matches, and Rachel found herself overwhelmed. She called David at 2 a.m, crying. I can't do this. I thought I could handle it, but I can't. I'm right back where I started. David came over immediately. He didn't tell her she was wrong or that she needed to push through. Instead, he said, "You're carrying too much. We need to figure out how to lighten your load." They talked for hours about boundaries, about the difference between helping others and sacrificing yourself, about how Rachel couldn't pour from an empty cup. By morning, they'd made a plan. Rachel would step back from taking matches for a while and focus on the administrative side. She would prioritize her own health and treatment. The program will survive without you taking matches right now, David told her. We have other volunteers. But it won't survive if you burn out completely. It was a hard lesson, but an important one. Rachel learned that self-care wasn't selfish, and that she could contribute to the program in ways that didn't destroy her own well-being. By the end of the first year, the Connection Project had helped 73 people and had volunteers in 3 neighboring towns. They'd partnered with mental health professionals, crisis hotlines, and community organizations. The program had evolved from a simple idea born on a bridge into something real and sustainable. At their 1-year celebration, held in the same community center basement where they'd first shared their idea, Rachel stood up to address the volunteers and the people they'd helped. "A year ago," she began, "I was sitting on a bridge, absolutely certain that my life had no value or purpose. I was wrong, obviously, since I'm standing here now. But I want to be clear about something. I wasn't saved by some magical transformation or miraculous cure. I was saved by someone showing up. By someone caring enough to sit with me and prove that I wasn't as alone as I thought." She looked at David, who was standing to the side, and then at all the faces in the room. "This program exists because we all understand that sometimes the difference between giving up and holding on is just having one person who genuinely cares. It's not complicated. It's not therapy or medicine or professional intervention. It's just human connection. And sometimes that's enough." The room erupted in applause, and Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but satisfaction, purpose. The knowledge that her pain, her struggle, her darkest moment had somehow transformed into something that helped others. After the celebration, as people mingled and shared stories, a young woman approached Rachel nervously. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. "Of course," Rachel said. The woman's hands were shaking. "I'm Melissa. I was matched with Helen 3 months ago. I don't know if anyone told you, but I'd been on that same bridge, the one where David found you. I'd been there twice, actually." Rachel felt her heart clench. "I'm glad you're here. Helen saved my life," Melissa continued. "Not by talking me out of anything or convincing me everything would be okay. She saved my life by making me promise to give her 30 days, just like David did for you. And somewhere in those 30 days I found enough reasons to want more days." Melissa paused, tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to thank you. Because if David hadn't shown up for you..." 3 years after that first night on the bridge, Rachel stood in the same spot where David had found her. But this time she wasn't alone, and she wasn't there to say goodbye to life. She was there for a different reason entirely. The Connection Project had grown beyond anything she and David could have imagined. It now operated in 15 communities, had over 100 trained volunteers, and had supported more than 400 people through their darkest moments. They'd partnered with universities to study the effectiveness of peer support and crisis intervention. The results were promising enough that mental health organizations were taking notice. But success brought new challenges. Funding was always tight. Volunteer burnout was a constant concern. And there were still people they couldn't reach. People who slipped through the cracks despite everyone's best efforts. David stood beside her on the bridge, along with several of their volunteers and people who'd been through the program. They were there to film a public service announcement about the Connection Project. The location was Rachel's idea. "This is where it started," she told the camera crew. "This is where I was ready to give up, and where someone proved to me that giving up wasn't my only option." The filming took several hours. They interviewed volunteers and participants, captured footage of the bridge and the water below, and recorded Rachel talking about the importance of connection in moments of crisis. When they finished, most people headed back to their cars, but Rachel lingered. David stayed with her, understanding that she needed a moment. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "About what almost happened?" "All the time," Rachel admitted. "Sometimes I'm grateful things turned out this way. Other times I wonder if I made the right choice. The pain hasn't gone away, you know. Some days it's still unbearable. But you're still here." "Yeah, I'm still here." Rachel smiled slightly. "Though I think on those really hard days I stay alive more out of stubbornness than anything else. Like I've come this far, might as well see what happens next." "That counts," David said. "Whatever keeps you here counts." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the water move below them. 3 years ago, that water had looked like an escape. Now it just looked like water. Rachel's phone buzzed. It was a text from Angela, the woman who'd been her first match. They'd stayed in touch even after the 30 days ended, becoming genuine friends. The text said, "Just wanted to remind you that you're amazing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, including yourself." Rachel showed David the message and he laughed. Angela always knows when you need to hear something. How does she do that? Because she knows you. Because that's what happens when people actually show up for each other. The next week, Rachel had to make a difficult decision. She'd been offered a part-time position at a clinic specializing in chronic pain management. It would mean less time for the Connection Project, but it would also mean using her nursing skills again, helping people navigate the medical aspects of chronic pain. She talked it over with David and the other core volunteers. They encouraged her to take it, assuring her that the program was stable enough to run without her constant involvement. "You've built something that can stand on its own," David told her. "That's the whole point. It's not dependent on any one person." Starting at the clinic was harder than Rachel expected. Being back in a medical setting brought back memories of who she used to be before the accident, before the pain, before everything changed. She had to work through complicated feelings about her own limitations and what she could realistically offer patients. But she also found it deeply rewarding. She understood her patients in ways many healthcare providers couldn't. When someone said they were tired of fighting, Rachel didn't give them empty platitudes. She said, "I know. It's exhausting. Let's figure out what we can do to make it a little less exhausting." Her honesty resonated with patients. Word spread that there was a nurse at the clinic who actually got it, who didn't judge or minimize pain, who treated chronic suffering as the serious issue it was. Meanwhile, the Connection Project continued to evolve. They developed specialized training for volunteers working with people dealing with chronic illness, based largely on Rachel's experiences. They created partnerships with hospitals to connect patients who felt hopeless about their conditions with peer support. One of their matches resulted in an unexpected development. A software developer who'd been through the program created an app to help people track their pain levels, medications, and emotional states. The app also included a feature to easily reach out to their Connection Project volunteer when they were struggling. "Technology meeting human connection," David said when they tested the app. Who would have thought? In year 4, Rachel was approached about speaking at a national conference on mental health and suicide prevention. The idea terrified her. Speaking to small groups was one thing, but presenting to hundreds of professionals was entirely different. "I don't know if I can do it," she told David. "What if I freeze up? What if I can't find the right words?" "Then you freeze up and stumble through it," David said practically. "But I think you'll be fine. You've told your story dozens of times now. This is just a bigger audience." Rachel agreed to do it, but only if David would be there with her. He agreed immediately. The conference was in a large city, held in a convention center that Rachel found overwhelming. Hundreds of mental health professionals, researchers, and advocates filled the halls. Rachel felt like an imposter among all these experts with their degrees and credentials. But when she took the stage and started talking, something shifted. She wasn't an imposter. She was someone with lived experience, with a story that mattered, with insights that came from surviving rather than just studying. She told them about the bridge, about the pain, about David showing up when she needed someone most. She explained how the Connection Project worked and why peer support was so powerful. She talked about the limitations of professional help alone, how sometimes people needed something more immediate and human than a weekly therapy appointment. "I'm not suggesting peer support replaces professional mental health care," she clarified, "but it can be a crucial bridge, no pun intended, between crisis and treatment. It can be the thing that keeps someone alive long enough to get the help they need." The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people approached her afterward, wanting to know more about the program, asking how to implement similar initiatives in their communities. Rachel exchanged contact information with counselors, social workers, crisis intervention specialists, and people who'd lost loved ones and wanted to honor their memory by helping others. On the flight home, exhausted but satisfied, Rachel turned to David. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't walked past that bridge that night? If you'd taken a different route home or been running late?" David was quiet for a moment. "I used to think about it a lot. All the coincidences that had to line up for me to be there at that exact moment. But I don't think it was coincidence. I think I was supposed to be there." "You don't really believe in fate, do you?" "Not exactly. But I believe in purpose. And I think sometimes our worst moments prepare us for our most important moments. Everything I went through, all the pain and struggle after coming back from deployment, it prepared me to recognize what you were going through. It gave me the tools to help." Rachel considered this. "So our suffering has meaning?" "I think we can choose to give it meaning," David said carefully. "It's not inherently meaningful. Pain is just pain. But what we do with it, what we build from it, that can matter. Back home, Rachel settled into a routine that balanced her work at the clinic, her involvement with the Connection Project, and her own self-care. She'd learned the hard way that she couldn't help others if she didn't take care of herself. Her pain was still there, would always be there, but she'd made peace with it in a way. It was part of her life, but it wasn't her entire life. She had work that mattered, relationships that sustained her, and a future that seemed worth sticking around for. One evening, Rachel received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Rachel?" a young woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Sophie. I'm at the bridge right now, the one downtown, and I found the Connection Project's number online. But it's after hours and I didn't know who else to call. And your personal number was listed as an emergency contact." Rachel's heart started pounding. "Sophie, I'm glad you called. Can you tell me what's going on?" Over the next hour, Rachel talked with Sophie, listening to her pain, acknowledging her desperation. Not trying to fix everything, but just being present over the phone. Eventually, Rachel convinced Sophie to meet her in person. They met at a cafe that was open late, and Rachel did for Sophie what David had done for her, offered genuine connection without judgment. "Why do you care?" Sophie asked, echoing Rachel's own question from years ago. "Because I've been where you are," Rachel said honestly, "and someone showed up for me. So now I show up for others. That's how this works." They talked until nearly midnight, and by the end, Sophie had agreed to accept help. Rachel connected her with a volunteer from the Connection Project and made sure Sophie had professional resources as well.